All right, guys, what I've got here is a factory GM windshield washer jar. This is a glass jar, and this is the bracket. Of course, I've drilled speed holes in it just to give it a little detail. Anyway, there for a while I was collecting these, and then I haven't found one in a long time, but this one I've had stored for about 10 years, but now I get some use. But anyway, they had electric ones and they had vacuum ones, and I like to get the vacuum ones. The only difference is the lid. Now the vacuum will have this little siphon deal here, and the electric ones have this big motor thing on it, so when you take it off it just looks like crap. Of course you could leave it on there for more originality look, but I wanted it to look clean and look better, basically. So what I did was I drilled the rivets out of the little slide top that goes on here. This is where you fill it, is this big hole. I drilled the rivets off from the bottom. I drilled that rivet and I drilled the rivet off of that, and I pulled these off. And I took some pretty thick sheet metal. I can't remember what gauge I used, but this is pretty thick sheet metal. And I put masking tape around this because it has knurling on the edge of this jar lid, and I wanted to keep that. So I put the masking tape right up to the edge of it, and then I scuffed this down real good, and I put panel bond on there and then squished that sheet metal on. I cut this out, to fit. And then everything that squeezed out on the sides, I just took my finger and went around it, and then I immediately pulled the masking tape. And then I went back and I kind of sanded it real light with some 320 grit paper, and got it to where it kind of molded in pretty good. And then at that point you have to figure out how to mount this stuff. Now what I did was I reoriented everything. I did it to where it's straight across from each other because I don't think they're that way from the factory. But anyway, this just made it smooth, and I could orient this the way I wanted for looks. But anyway, what I do is I take some, I can't remember because I mocked this up a long time ago. This is either a 632 or an 832 screw here. But it is a stainless steel button Allen head, and to me they just look a little trick, look a little custom, and they also kind of mimic the factory rivet head. So anyway, that's how I reattach the parts. Now if you wanted to keep sliding your top piece open and use it, I would use a nylon lock nut underneath it. That way you can, it'll stay tight where you want it for your tension. But for me, I'm basically going to tighten it down till it stops. Because I'm not going to fill this here, because it'll end up scratching the paint. When you slide that top over, it's just going to scratch that paint up. So what I'm going to do every time I have to fill this is just pull the hose off of this and then unscrew the lid and fill it with fluid and then put the hose back on. But anyway, so that is how I did my lid. Now I do have a reproduction decal that goes on here that's yellow. It says GM and it has a bunch of lettering on it, words. I have not put that on here yet, but anyway, that'll go on there. Now what I did is I ordered 2 of these, and the other decal I cut the GM piece out and put on my universal windshield washer motor, which I'll get to in a second. Now at that point, you'll want to take a piece of a square sheet of Felpro gasket material. This is cork. It just comes in a square, and I cut it out to fit in the jar, and it'll go pretty much like that. But anyway, that'll seal the jar to the lid instead of it, not having anything in there and that leaking over. So that is what I'm going to do. But anyway, this got pretty intricate. Now you do not have to do this intricate. I did this in the 90s to a 55 4-door I had, and I didn't do this part. I just put a rubber hose off that suction plastic piece down into the bottom, and I used a little screen thing here from a GM windshield washer bottle off a car. I think it was off a Monte Carlo or something. Early 80s model. Probably 70s and 80s, any GM would probably have the same thing. It's just a little stainless steel screen and a piece of cone plastic. It's basically so no debris will get in there and clog up your little motor. Anyway, you could put just the hose on that, leave it hanging down in there, and be good to go. The thing for me this time was this thing's pretty visible. Even when you have your blue fluid in there, you can still see through it. So I wanted this to be nice and straight. Now I'm going to paint this a shade of blue, and that way it kind of disappears in there. It's not as prominent as if I painted it black or something. But anyway, this is a piece of 5/16 steel brake line, and I haven't sanded down. I need to paint it, but I built a piece of sheet metal just for a tab, basically drilled a couple holes in it, and I welded it up here on the end of that deal and then ground it smooth. Now at that point, I'll try to mock this up here. Anyway, this will go on here like that. And then this piece, I have an O-ring that goes on this plastic piece. It's a little bitty thin O-ring. I don't know what size it is. I have a universal box of O-rings. Anyway, I slipped that O-ring over that. And then because this brake line inside diameter is bigger than this, so it would be loose. The cork would probably seal it, but I went ahead and put the O-ring on it anyway. Anyway, this will go on here like that. And then I'll put a nut, lock washer and a nut on here, and that'll bolt down tight. But at that point, with this being cone shaped, this will go on here and you can actually smack that and it'll stay tension set on there. But what I'm going to do is use a little panel bond on this and drive it on there and let the panel bond even further hold it on. But anyway, that'll go down in the jar and it'll be a straight piece of steel instead of a coiled up piece of rubber hose. But you can use just rubber hose. So anyway, that is how I did my lid and for the jar. And I'm not going to set that down there. So anyway, this is the motor that I use. This is available at just about any parts store. You can even get it online, obviously. This is an ANCO brand, universal windshield washer motor. And the part number is 65-01. And this thing is like $12. Just a power and a ground, and that's it. So you could use any kind of toggle switch, momentary push button switch anywhere under your dash or whatever to activate it to make it work. Keep in mind this needs to be mounted close to that so the suction is strong on it. Don't mount this way back here and have this way up front. It won't pull as hard. Anyway, what I did to make, for my switch to make this work, what I do is I take a factory wiper cable transmission. This cable end goes to your wiper motor out here to activate it on or off. But anyway, this is a factory 55 Belair knob with the push button in the center. Some of these don't have the push button. I got this from a member at Tri-5 quite a few years ago. But anyway, it has, on this button, it has just a little steel rod coming out of the back of it. And what I did was I took the back off of the wiper transmission and I drilled a hole in the plate piece back here, and I did a momentary push button from Radio Shack in there, and the rod is going right to the front of that switch. So when you push in on that, it activates that switch and turns your motor on. So it works exactly like factory, and your switch is contained behind your transmission here. So this is pretty much what you would start out with as a basic wiper transmission. Now this one here had this mess on it. And then there is a plate that goes on the back and it screws on. It has these funky square style headed screws that I just use pliers to take off. Anyway, you don't need this centerpiece, so just take these out, pull this off, and then right here is the little plate piece. I have seen these that already have holes in them, and you could use that one. Some of them do not have the holes. Mine, I think it had the hole, but I think I had to use a step bit to open it up just a little bit more. I don't really remember. It's been a long time ago that I mocked this up. But anyway, that is kind of what it looks like, and if you have this style, you have to drill a hole. Anyway, I do not remember the thread on these. I ended up taking an original to the hardware store, and I just matched up the threads on something. It looks like a number 6. But I can't tell if it's fine or coarse thread. So it could be a 632, but don't hold me to it. Anyway, I ended up having to get longer screws. And at that point, I bought a little pack of that same number 6 or number 8, whatever they are, lock washers. There's a pack of them. I ended up having to put 4 lock washers stack on there on each side and then put the plate on and screw it down. And I bought just some stainless Phillips screws to replace it. But anyway, the switch mounts right on the back, and your factory push button activates that switch. So that's kind of neat thing to do there. and it, you know, it all still looks stock. But anyway, I'm pretty proud of it. It's another one of those optional parts that I wanted to put on my 55 and then turn around, and to have it look all stock and operate like it's supposed to is kind of cool. And you know, if your motor ever goes bad, it's 12 bucks. I have never looked into having the original style stuff replaced or rebuilt, but I would imagine it's a pretty penny to have original. But for me, having a $12 universal one worked out great. Now the decal on here, I put a GM decal on it, and it is actually off the second, because I bought 2 of these decals. I cut the GM out of the factory decal and put on here. Now I have this where it mounts underneath my core support, on the back side of the core support, just underneath the top bar a little bit. So you just see a little bit of hose coming out to this. I have this mounted behind the core support on the driver's side, which is around about the factory location. I made a custom bracket and everything with hidden hardware, so the bracket will attach that way. But anyway, guys, that is just a way of doing a factory windshield washer setup in your Tri-5 Chevrolet, or pretty much any GM vehicle from the 50s. I don't think I showed this. You can pause the screen on that. This is from Radio Shack. This is a 4-pack of those push buttons. And that number, if this is the right part number, it is 2751547, pack of 4. But I don't know if that's it or not. Anyway, I'll get that back up there again. You can pause the screen. Hopefully the GoPro is adjusting to that. I'm trying to hold it as still as I can. And that is pretty much what it looks like. Get a button out here so you can get a better look. Keep in mind, there is 2 styles of switches. Don't just think you can put any switch in there, because you cannot. You need these, but that is what the button looks like. 2 little connections. You'll have to solder your wires on there. And it has a little nut and a lock washer on it. But there is another set of them buttons that as soon as you put power to it, it'll make that motor run until you push that. You want the one that works opposite, which is what I have. This only gets power when you push on it. So anyway, guys, that's pretty much it. I guess I better run you through the hose. It's just, you know, you got to have your hose to go from your motor to your windshield wipers. And this is how I'm doing it. I'm running my hose up underneath the inner fender, and it'll come out to here. I drilled a hole in my cowl. Now I have a rubber grommet that'll go on here, and that hose will go down through there. And I'll reach up in here in the cowl and pull it, and then I'll put a little plastic tee in here, a little vacuum tee, and run it to my extensions. Your extensions have your little squirter things on them. So anyway, guys, I hope it helps somebody out if you ever wanted to do a factory style windshield washer jar assembly and make it work like stock.